Yo, yo.
Yo,
There we go.
I could hear myself from like your room. I was so loud. You're like the echo through the phone.
The echoes of your life.
Mm, that's it. I need to be careful about saying that word though, because I have an Alexa, but I changed her name to Echo, and I really don't want her to start talking to me from another room because that would be creepy.
That would be creepy. Well, let's roll into our topic today, a rather somber topic. Normally, we do sarcastic takes on various aspects of pop culture. However, today, due to the recent passing of the drummer of the Foo Fighters, we are on a somber subject. And it's interesting, too, because we have the two different perspectives, with you being a super fan, super nerd, and then me kind of like occasionally showing up at the party. So, welcome to my summer lair space station oddity. I am Sammy.
I am Stephanie. I got nothing good. It's a somber day. Did that even come out? Did you hear me?
I did,
Hello.
yes. No, I was just giving it a moment of
Okay.
silence.
Oh,
Just for
fair.
the.
Fair.
Yeah, so as you said, it is a somber day. Taylor Hawkins has passed away at the age of 50 over the weekend. Um, and so there's a couple of things I want to kind of like talk about as we kind of get into it because you've also seen them live and stuff like that. So I want to give you space and time for your memories. But
Hmm.
I want to give us a little bit of structure because a lot of people were making the obvious connection, which was that, like, Dave Grohl was in Nirvana and then Kurt Cobain took his life, so he died. So he was the drummer in that band, and then he started a new band, and then that drummer died, and that kind of thing. I felt that connection was a little on the nose. The more important connection I felt was, and he covered this in his book Storyteller, was that
Hmm.
out of the grief of Nirvana and being lost, he eventually started to like record the earliest Foo Fighter songs. He was just in the
Yeah.
studio by himself, and it was that grief and that like he had to do something, right? Obviously, he took some time and tried to figure things out, and then he slowly started recording, and that is out of that darkness, out of that despair, that we got all this incredible light and all this incredible music via the Foo Fighters.
Hmm. And it's amazing because I remember how long I mean, I could go on Wikipedia, I guess, and look it up, but I'm trying to remember how long Nirvana was technically active. And it wasn't that long. It was just like 5 years or something like that. But the Foo Fighters, I was at the concert last year. He was talking about like it's been 26 years, and it's amazing to me because I think about that. I think about when we lost Kurt Cobain and all that, and how tragic that was, and how you want to undo things like that. You want to undo that kind of hurt for people, but at the same time, we wouldn't have the Foo Fighters if it hadn't happened. And now we're at this other side of it where, you know, the drummer lost his lead singer, and now the lead singer's lost his drummer. And, you know, Taylor and anybody who's, honestly, I think at this point, anybody who's even a passing fan would know Taylor and Dave were best friends. I mean, they were brothers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Taylor was also the face of the band in a weird way too. As much as
yeah.
Dave was, it's not normally
Hmm.
like when you think of like I don't know Red Hot Chili Peppers or something. It's Anthony and Flea. Yes, everyone kind of knows Chad Smith and stuff in the back there, and if we lost him, it would be tragic. But it's Anthony and Flea, and that's how most bands are, right? U2 is Bono and
Yeah.
Edge. Um,
Hmm.
but Foo Fighters was built different. Even though like you have iconic guys like Pat Smear in there, and his legacy and his musical contributions are huge, it was really Dave and Taylor that was the faces of the band, which is unusual.
It is actually because usually the person sitting behind the drum kit is not there. You don't see them anyways, so it's like they're not usually ever the face of the band. That's rare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I don't know if it's I don't know if trying to think of how to phrase this. I don't know if the reason that became what it is because of their friendship, or because Taylor's just such an affable person. he was so nice and so sweet, and always would take a moment to talk to anybody, and anybody would tell you his smile was infectious.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it was the fact that there's a tweet that I'd seen a couple times in the last couple days. Somebody, forget who tweeted out, but basically said that Taylor Hawkins was probably the only drummer on earth who could play with Dave Grohl and not make you wish that it was Dave Grohl who was sitting behind the kit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a drummer who could keep up with him, and I don't know if maybe that's because of it. It's Dave was famous for being one of the best drummers in the world.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even the drummer of his own band. He didn't need to be. He had Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if that's if or maybe it's just a combination of all three is the reason that it was, Taylor did.
There's a one of the clips that were floating around was when Foo Fighters would perform live, they would sometimes do a Queen cover, and so David Grohl.
Oh yeah, we had it at ours too.
Yeah, so Dave Grohl would go on the drums, and then Taylor would sing it. And so Taylor did he kind of introduced the song, and he said, "This is great. I get to be backed up by one of the world's best drummers," or something like that. I forgot the exact line that he had. And Dave Grohl, you can hear him mutter on the microphone, "Shut up!" You know what I mean? It wasn't. It was respect, right? As you said, it's very intimidating to take over the drums. And the reason why he got hired in the band was because the original drummer they had disappointed Dave, right? So Dave had to fire the original guy. I can't remember who the Pete Best was for the Foo Fighters. But he got replaced. And so when Dave called up Taylor, it was just to say, do you know any other drummers? It wasn't to say, do you want to join the band? Taylor surprised him and said, yeah, I'll join the band.
I have 50,000 thoughts starting floating through my head about just all of this, because it's I keep circling back to so many other musicians and how they met, and it's funny how kismet comes about. And it's you just said, it's Dave didn't call him to join the band. He called him to see if he knew anybody who could do it, and he's like, yeah, me
Yeah,
I'll do it, me. And it's and that was fate intervening, because I don't think we would have the Foo, just just as Dave is responsible for bringing about the Foo Fighters, dealing with everything that he was going through after Kurt and all that kind of stuff, and then just how Foo Fighters came about it, and how their drummer, they got rid of the other drummer, and then just all of this, all these small steps that got to this point. I don't think that we ever could have really had the Foo Fighters if we didn't have the two of them, and it makes me think back to, a similar situation with, when it was Linkin Park, which, I mean, I will always look back to.
Mm-hmm.
Chester was not the original lead singer. Now Mike and them, they didn't know Chester beforehand, but their original lead singer, Mark Wayfield, he wasn't fired. He left because he didn't it was a whole bunch of stuff over not getting record deals and just thinking it wasn't going to go anywhere and being disappointed, and so he left the band, and so they had to go find a new singer, and so they did do auditions, and that's how they met Chester. But it's still that same thing where there was a whole other band that was ready to be a band and ready to record and ready to go do that thing, and it's the world was no, we need to intervene, because this is not the band.
Mm-hmm.
It might seem like a whole band, it might seem like you have all the parts and all the pieces and everything moving in the direction it needs to move to be a band that plays, and the fates are nope, that's not the band, this is the band. And so you get to this point where, that piece, that spark that, brought it together, that missing piece that you didn't know was missing, that brought it together, is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you go from there?
In Storyteller, Dave Grohl actually also talks about another TSN turning point, another moment of recognition where, so Kurt has died and he's kind of lost, and I think maybe it was a year or so after. The dates in Storyteller are kind of murky, but basically it was a period of time after when he got a call, and it was from Tom Petty, and it was to join the Tom Petty band, obviously to go on the road and to be basically a more or less session drummer, touring drummer kind of thing. It wasn't necessarily
Yeah.
to contribute creatively.
Hmm.
And so those were his two choices. It was either like because you know how you can imagine how lost he felt after this whole momentum with this band and Nirvana and how big it was and
Yeah.
all these things, and then writing all these really cool songs with Kurt in the studio and stuff like this, and then that momentum stops, and then it's like what you do. It's like when an NBA player retires. Someone retire at like 35 years old. And yes, you're a millionaire and yes, you're famous, but that momentum has stopped. And then what do you do now for the rest of your life? It can be really intimidating to try and figure that
Hmm.
out. And so his choice was either like join Tom Petty, maybe not create as like be as creative as possible because that's obviously Tom Petty's band and the Heartbreakers have a whole system up and running, or
Yeah.
work on these songs that eventually, like we said, became the Foo Fighters album and we were off and running. And if he had made a different choice or maybe a different even timing, it could have all been like super weird how things just kind of work out like that.
Yeah. Um, but if you, I mean, all through Storyteller, I'm like the choices that he made, um, they kind of were, they were never on the easy path. They were never on the, I almost want to say the correct path, but that's not the word I'm looking for. I mean, easy path really is it. I the thing that got me hooked was actually the very beginning of the story, like the whole opening thing where he's talking about, and I cannot remember, and it's like when he was going with his mom to that underground jazz club,
Mm-hmm.
and he got up on, they were letting people come up on stage to play with them, and he got
He
up
was a
and he just
teenager
like,
at that point, I think.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
his first time doing it, he had no idea what he was doing, and I'm like, I remember reading that going, oh God, I no 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 no
Mm-hmm.
no 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 no. I would be able to do that. And he had no idea what he was doing. He knew he had no idea what he was doing, but he did it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just move forward, and he just kept finding these things out about himself that he was capable of, that he didn't know he was capable of, or things that he loved that he didn't know he loved, or wasn't, it wasn't until there was some defining moment, something in his life that goes, no, I'm going in this direction,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't seem like much of any of it was like you were talking about. It's like you have the choice between these two things, and you see the easy one that would still do, it'd still have a good life, and he didn't choose that.
It's
But then
almost
I but
safe,
then,
more than easy. It's almost
yeah,
safe, right? Like Tom
yeah,
Petty's up and running, it's super successful. All you got to do is
yeah,
drum like Mary Jane's Last Dance. That's pretty simple and
yeah.
safe.
I'll tell you this, though, I always thought he was too, I was like, no, not Tom Petty. Any band but Tom Petty. He was too good of a drummer
Mm-hmm.
for Tom Petty's band. Tom Petty, great music. Love Tom Petty, but it was just like, even if that had been the case, I kind of wonder would he have stayed doing it? Not because it maybe wasn't what he was supposed to do, but because, like, I just can't imagine his skill set shining in a place like, in a band like that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, it's good music, but it wasn't
Creative.
I didn't want his music or the right music, but I think that's kind of where I'm going. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it wasn't what he was what he was meant to be doing.
Which is why Taylor signed up for Foo Fighters, because as successful as he was hanging out and doing all that stuff with Alanis Morissette and other bands,
Yeah,
he knew that if he went into Foo Fighters, he'd be able to create and write music, right?
yeah.
So that's a lot more exciting sometimes, I think, rather than like going out on tour and doing like You Ought to Know. I don't understand how the Stones can still manage to tour and still get excited about playing like Painted Black or Gimme Shelter or something that
Yeah.
they've done. I can't imagine how many times they played those songs, right? And like, I'm sure they've done it acoustics. I'm sure they've done a little stripped down. Like maybe they threw in some extra lines or whatever. Like they've done through every single possible variation of Painted Black and Gimme Shelter and stuff like that. And I can't imagine how they can still continue to have enthusiasm for those songs.
Oh, I know. I mean, I think about all of them. I mean, let's see, who are the old acts are still touring? They're still touring. AC/DC. Is AC/DC still touring? I think they are. I know that
No, the
they.
drummer's got
No,
MS or something.
yeah, that's right, that's right, that's right. But I mean, like, it was fairly, it wasn't like they
Yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
stop
They were
touring
still
every
going
year
up
and
for a
every
while.
year.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
then, like, the Eagles were still touring for a millennia and a half. And, I think back of all these men, especially ones that weren't constantly creating new music. And you're right. It's like, how do you just go out and perform those songs over and over and over again? I mean, as I watching the Foo Fighter, when I went to their concert last year, some of the songs I was listening to, going all the way back to like Everlong. And I was thinking the same thing because it looked like they were having so much fun, so much fucking fun. And I think the same thing. I'm like, how do you keep having fun doing this? Because when they play their music, they play it pretty straight on.
Mm-hmm.
Linkin Park, when you would go to see them at a show, there was no guarantee that the songs that you knew were going to be performed the way that you knew them. They were, Mike in particular was very innovative with coming up with remixes for their own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Foo Fighters, word for word down, bridge, all of it. It was it was the music. There was very little deviation, and it's just but they still look like they were just having a ball, just the most fun you could have after 26 years performing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I have got, it wasn't Queen that they did it, that when Taylor came up and saying it wasn't Queen, it was like, it wasn't ABBA. It might have been, why can't I think of it? Saturday Night Fever, Bee Gees. It might have been Bee Gees. Might have been a Bee Gees song he did.
That seems like a Taylor
Um,
song.
and it was like a full on, like a massive, massive, I almost said crystal ball. That's not it. Disco ball.
Mm-hmm.
Disco ball came out of the ceiling, and like we're talking like gold lettering, lit up in lights. It was just about as gaudy 70s as you could get.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was performing in and it's just like it just looked like fun.
Mm-hmm.
Not just because I was there and I was having fun, but it looked like it. It gave off that vibe. And I mean, and that was, that was when Taylor came up to sing. And you don't see that very often. You don't see, you know, other band members go out there and practically take on the lead singer of their own band, and sometimes, do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, not their own songs, but just the performance that they give. And you know um I've never seen, Taylor had a side act, Chevy Metal. I never saw them. A friend of mine, she saw him a bunch of time, and you said he just exuded it. You could just feel that vibe from him, that he was always having fun. That was always having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it saddens me to think, like, because I don't know if you watched, there's a clip floating around of his last performance and Dave introducing him and making him stand up so everybody could see his very awesome pants that he was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, uh, it saddens me when I think of those sorts of things, and you're like, that that magic, that kismet, not cohesion. I can't think of the words that I want to think of. It's Monday. Um, but magic. So does magic is a good word. That magic that was between them. You're not going to have that again. And it's like, you know, how do you move forward? Do you move forward? And if you do, like, what is that going to look like? What's that going to be for you? Um, that it's who's band members in particular, not artists, not just singular artists. I mean, it was when we lost Prince, Bowie within like a minute of each other, and then George Michael. They're all artists.
Mm-hmm.
They were their own singular entity. But when you lose band members, especially band members that are so entwined with their band, you have to wonder, should they move forward? It's rare that I've seen bands move forward that continue to do well and maybe even reinvent themselves after the fact. Like AC/DC is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, now that I think about it, I can't think of any other one besides ACDC
And
that managed
ACDC
to
kind of
really.
cheated because they just basically got the same voice, more or less, right?
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I always have to take a moment. I'm like, was this before or after? Was this before or after?
Mm-hmm.
What album is this on?
Yeah. So
So,
that's a rare example where like they just basically it was just like Lego blocks. They just replaced one with another. So it's not as quite as like chaotic as the Chili Peppers, right?
yeah.
Where you can tell from different eras who's the guitar guy and who's not, and it doesn't always go seamless.
So you mentioned at the beginning, I'm obviously a huge Foo Fighters fan, and I've mentioned many, 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 many times on this show and many, many times in my life that I'm a big Linkin Park fan. So I've, and well, it's not his own band, but huge Chris Cornell fan. So like, I'm a big, big, big fan. So, in the last 5 years, um, there's been some musical loss for me that was very, very that hit
Mm-hmm.
that hit hard and just hit wrong. And I'm wondering, like, have you, we talk about, you mention bands all the time and music and stuff, but I've never heard you mention any particular band or artist or anything like that that is like a go-to for you. Or so I would wonder is like, have you ever, have you experienced this, like losing, for all intents and purposes, when the music has been when a particular band or artist has been part of your life for so long and have had such a big impact on your life, it's almost like losing a family member. It's almost like losing a friend.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm wondering, like, have you had to go through that? Have you gone through that?
MCA, BC Boys, and
Oh
that
God.
one answers your question because the BC Boys actually parallels quite a bit of Foo Fighters. Like they both had a really goofy sense of humor that was on display.
Yeah.
Both band had a number of special iconic hits and of course really cool videos. Both bands were of course heavily involved in film. BC Boys distributed a lot more, but Dave Grohl made TV shows and films. And both bands took a little while to kind of solidify their sonic identity and style, right? Like the first little bit of Foo Fighters was just kind of Dave on his own, kind of had to get some band members in. Some people were kind of shuffling in and out. So, and then the end, like you said, Foo Fighters been around for 20, 25 years. Like, much like the Beastie Boys, we grew up with both bands. Like, you become an adult or whatever you become as you get older. And it's the same thing where, like, MCA died of cancer, and it was just like, it just didn't seem to make sense because the Beastie Boys, much like the Foo Fighters, they represent this youth, this kind of energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the thing is Taylor's death was shocking, but also the fact that he was 50 was also shocking. Like it just never occurred to me that he was 50. That seemed like an old man age. And so when you have the two parallels, to me that's what I was thinking about was Beastie Boys and Foo Fighters. And Beastie Boys they made a documentary called Beastie Boys Story, and Dave Grohl put out The Storyteller. So
Yeah.
there are a number of parallels there between the two bands, and it's just like you said, you lose this one person, and in the Beastie Boys case, they more or less stopped. I'm sure they have some outtakes and things kind of floating around, but the momentum more or less stopped. And so we lose not just the MCA, but we also lost the band.
Yeah. It's, I remember there was a lot of people asking if they would go on afterwards. I mean, but I think that's true of like anybody. I'm like, yeah, with MCA, they knew that that was coming, as opposed to, like this with Taylor or Chester or Chris
Mm-hmm.
or any of the big ones that we've lost.
The left field ones.
Um, yeah, the left field ones. I mean, and
Bowie
that's
was
always
sick
the
for a
question.
while,
It's like,
right?
yeah, he was sick for a minute. And then, and then there's always that question, like, do you go on or can you go on? And like, yeah, BC Boys, no, it's like, you have you just lost a third of your band,
Mm-hmm.
and someone who's very, very, very much, you know, vocally present, as they all are, on the music.
Yeah.
And so it's, and the same thing, I think part of the reason that, it'll be 5 years this year since Chester passed away, and obviously there has been no new Linkin Park music or anything like that since then. Because I mean, other than the unreleased music, and it's you look at that and you're like, there's 6 people in this band, right? There's 6 members of Linkin Park,
Mm-hmm.
and now there's 5. And but at the same time, it's like, so you still have the majority of the band and one of the 2 lead singers. But when you have somebody whose presence is so intertwined, so connected, so just the touching point of the touchstone of that music, how, you can't really go on from that. How do you go on from that? It's like, yeah, it's like, the question is like, do you replace Chester? Well, if you're going to do Linkin Park music in some level, you have to replace Chester. You have to find somebody to sing his part, right? But how do you find that voice? How do you find that particular kinetic energy?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, when I saw that comment on Twitter, someone's like, said that, Taylor was probably the only one who could, take on Dave Grohl and not be upset that, you're not hearing Dave Grohl on the drums, and yeah, he's a drummer and there are drummers. It's an instrument, he's not he's not a vocalist for the band, which is very different
Mm-hmm.
loss. But at the same time, how do you move on from that kind of kinetic energy that, like you said, he was more he was he was a face of the band as much as Dave was.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you or is that the stopping point?
It's a hard thing too because there's quite a bit of footage. Like if you watch the HBO show Sonic Highways, you can kind of see how the band works and creates and stuff like this. And that was one of the things I think Dave was really smart about, which was that like kind of keeping the creative environments creative and trying new ways
Yeah.
to record, to write, to do those kind of things. And it's always impossible. Like when you hear a song, it's hard to know, like with a band like Foo Fighters or even like the Beastie Boys, who can kind of contributed what to what. One of the famous stories is like Bill Berry, the drummer for the REM. He was one who sparked Everybody Hurts. He had the basic bones of the song, and they were off and running. So you would think that like a song like, and that's one of their biggest hits. So you would think a song like that would come from either Michael Stipe or somebody else in the band, but it came from the drummer. And so when he left, you lose like this songwriting partner. You lose this spark, this guy who's bringing in melodies or harmonies or doing something. Even though
Yeah.
the general public may not know because we're not in the studios with the band, until you hear stories like he's the guy who sparked Everybody Hurts, they're like, oh snap, that's a major hit. Like you can't just quote unquote replace him. And they tried to do that. The next album after he left, they just used a drum machine, and it was very soulless album,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that's the thing too, where like you talk about that magic and it's that alchemy, right? When Foo Fighters all get together in the same room, there's something about it that works. We've seen this before. This is an extreme example, but we've seen this before with Billy Corgan. And when he's with the Smashing Pumpkins, for some stupid reason, it works. When he's in Zwan or these other bands or other things like that, it just doesn't work. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have that group of people who are the Foo Fighters. And I don't know that it's quite easy to replace it. To replace somebody like Taylor, and then just be able to like move ahead, move forward.
Yeah. I when I don't know if you saw any of it, but when Chester died, they did that memorial concert. It's a 3-hour concert at the Hollywood Bowl, the September, October, doesn't matter. It's right around end of September, October, right around there. So it's only like 2-3 months later. And they had other musicians come in and sing for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And as good as some of them were, like really good at that particular song, it was visceral that it wasn't Chester.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I know probably part of that comes from the fact that it was, was new, and it was literally it's the only time they've performed since then. So it was very, obviously very hyper obvious that it wasn't going to ever be Chester. But at the same time, it's like you hear it and you're like, it's not right. It's not the sound. It's not right. It's like it's missing something. And I don't think that was entirely because it was a memorial concert. I think, I mean, if there's anything, Mike Shinoda is a consummate, showman.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very good at getting on a stage, even when he's about to completely lose his shit, and put on a good show. He talks about it in one of his songs from, or raps about it, I should say, one of his songs from uh, Post Traumatic. I almost lost it in the middle of a couple songs. Um, that's the line. He doesn't really remember doing it, and it's just all he remembers is that it was really hard to keep it together for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But he still did it, and you could still tell like that vibe and that energy that he's very good at putting forward was there, but it just wasn't Park.
Mm-hmm.
5 of the 6 people wasn't Linkin Park. And so I did, and again, we keep looping back. It is the drummer, which has been, by the way, an interesting conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because you tell people, it's one thing you say, if I'd said, oh my God, Dave Grohl died, oh my God, Chester Day, oh my God, Kurt Cobain died.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the lead singer. We're talking about the front of the band. We're talking about the face, the sound, the voice.
Like when we saw when Queen
And
died, when Freddie Mercury died, and Queen was like, "What do we do now?"
yeah, and when I've been telling people, that, like, I'm upset, and here's why I'm upset, and I say the drummer, it's a very particular reaction you get from people.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you can see the buildup in their face. Oh my God, someone died, and they're like, oh, the drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you explain that? How do you explain to people, it's like, this is about how this particular, yes, that person played an instrument, and yes, you can find somebody who can technically play those songs again, but it's not the same energy, and it's not, it's like, how do you explain like the importance of this person in this band? It's been weird trying to explain that. It's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I stopped saying the drummer died. I stopped
Mm-hmm.
saying that. I just said Taylor Hawkins, the Foo Fighters died. Like, and that's all I would say. And then it's like, and then if somebody asked about it, like, I might have gone a little bit more detail, but I stopped saying Taylor Hawkins, the drummer died. I'm like, or the drummer of Foo Fighters. I'm like, no, I stopped saying it because it was just like this. You could see it, like, it's like, oh well, that's not as important as if this person had died. I'm like, this is.
The example of what you're talking about is Led Zeppelin. When their drummer died, John Bonham, they more or less stopped. That was the end of the
Mm-hmm.
momentum, and that was the end of the band for them. They've all Robert has obviously gone on to make other like solo projects and other music and whatever. They're still making music, but as Led Zeppelin, they're more or less kind of that's it. They've done some odd performances here at the Kennedy Center and stuff like that. They had the what's her face from Heart do some of the vocals and stuff like that as well. Things like that. But for the most part, it's the momentum died when John Bonham died. So they
Yeah.
shut it down. That's one of the most obvious examples when I was thinking of like to answer the question of like do Foo Fighters go on? I was like Led Zeppelin did not go on.
So what do you think? Do you think that, I mean, it's too soon to.
It's way too soon, but I don't think I would be surprised just because you and I and many others obviously know the value of what Taylor was to the Foo Fighters. And I
Yeah.
don't. It's like you said. The reason that people were like whatever, it's a drummer, is because that there is that attitude, right? Like we all have like there's drummer jokes, right? There's not necessarily bass player jokes, right? Like there's drummer jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Like what was the last thing the drummer said before he got fired from the band? Hey guys, let's try to record one of my songs. There's lots of things like that where like the drummer is very like disposable, which is also kind of a weird thing because it's also the thing of like people don't fully realize what a drummer does and how he provides the time and all that kind of stuff, like the structure to the band. So it kind of overlooks everything. Everyone kind of focuses on the lead singer especially because he writes or she writes a lot of the lyrics and things like that. But the drummer is instrumental. There's a pun for you. In what a band does. And I think beyond that, because Dave would obviously know that. Dave knows that as a drummer. But also, you lose a brother like Taylor. And I think it just that loss just becomes too hard to overcome.
I'm trying to.
Is there another band you can think of that like lost like Led Zeppelin's the obvious example, but like
No, I can't think of. I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain. I mean, but there's. I mean, but it's like you look at, yeah, Led Zeppelin, yeah, it's they're it's like they're the antithesis of AC/DC. you know Led Zeppelin loses their drummer, and that's it, they're done, they're not moving forward. Led Zeppelin loses their lead singer,
ACDC, you
and
mean?
yes, that's
Mm-hmm.
what I meant,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, yes. AC/DC loses their lead singer, which is, what many consider to, and for good reason, the most important part of the band, and managed to keep going and keep going well. And yes, they basically did replace him with practically the same person, but it's not like they're the only band that's ever tried that.
In
Now he didn't
Excess,
die, but
Queen, The Doors.
yeah, but I mean, like, it didn't die, but they tried, but they replaced Steve Perry in Journey.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, like God, they were, what's his name? That American Idol winner went to
In
was doing Queen
Excess.
for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, and
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah.
like,
Sorry, the guy with the eyeshadows and the nail polish and all that. What's
yeah,
his name? Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
it's Chris something.
yeah. Sure.
Well, because there were two Chris's that season. One of them won. The other one was like second. It was like a Chris Daughtry and then him, and I can't remember. I should remember that season being the two Chris's.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Which is embarrassing because you can't replace Freddie Mercury or Michael Hutchins like as lead singers, like as frontmen. That talent and that raw animal magnetism, like all those things that make up a quality frontman, you can't just
mhm.
quote unquote replace those guys. It was kind of embarrassing. Those bands kind of still tried to go on, but it's what we're talking about because it's the left field. Like nobody expected Michael Hutchins to die, especially the way that he did die. And so now this band is now like, well, what do we do? How do we keep going, right?
Mhm. It's the I will say, okay, you know what? I will say this. When they try, there are interesting things that come out of it. And sometimes it can be fun for just like nostalgia's sake for like a minute. But no, it's like you're never going to be able to be successful. You're never going to be able to be what you were because you don't have that element anymore. Um, I'm there. God, since like what year did it start? It started in 2016. That's when that was the year we lost. That was the year we lost Bowie, Prince, and um George Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So close together. And then the next year was, we lost Chris and Chester, and it's you keep going through these, and I don't know, it makes you almost have like your own the question of your own. This is going to get heady, and I'll say this, and then we can be done with it if you want, but it almost makes you question your own mortality. You're like, am I seeing more people die because it's just the need, it just happened and it's bad and it sucks, or is it happening because I'm getting older and that's what happens when you get older?
Both.
More people around you die.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Both.
depressing.
Yeah,
That's
it's the same
depressing.
thing when you get when you're a teenager. Everyone just in relationships and couples or whatever. But then as you get into your 20s, people start getting married, and then you start attending more weddings. Right? As a teenager, you generally don't attend weddings, or at least weddings of people that you know and care about.
Yeah.
And it's just a product of getting older, right? Like Bowie, I think just was closing on 70 when he died. 69, I think, maybe 68, something like that.
Something like
So
that.
Um, so like, that's a senior citizen. He could have retired. Like that's early bird special, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just because again, like I said, they're in this business of making music and pop culture. So it always makes them seem a lot more youthful, and it probably does make them seem a lot more youthful, right? Like I said, when Taylor died, I was also shocked that he was 50. It just never occurred to me that he was 50. He always seemed like a not necessarily like a frat boy in terms of like like a douchebag or anything, but just a frat boy, that kind of energy and like party and like wearing like shirts with no sleeves and like he's having a good time and he's out late at night, that kind of thing.
When you look at some of these people who do pass away, I was like, so he passed away at 50, which is way, way, way too young to pass away. But you're starting to get to a point where it's like you've lived your life. It, you're right. Same thing though. I did not know he was 50, but I'm like, oh, he's 50. So it's like, and the first thing I thought was like, okay, so it could have been a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking those things that get a little bit older, whereas obviously it's younger. It's like, oh, well, obviously it had to have been drugs, and
Mm-hmm.
it's or even like he could look like Bob Saget. I mean, he was a comedian. Comedians, it's just like well, pretty much most of the entertainment industry, it's nature of the biz, drugs go around,
Mm-hmm.
And so you question that because it was sudden, but also you're like, but he was older, like he could easily have died from a heart attack, and then you find out that it was actually trauma entirely, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you just kind of look at this stuff when they get older, and and do you ask yourself, yeah, okay, I mean, it kind of could have been, and it's like I don't know it's like that's just the thought that went through my head when I heard he was 50. It's like I didn't know he was 50, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, he's 50. I'm like, so so it could have happened, something could happen, and you stop immediately jumping to well, something traumatic happened, or it was drugs or something like that. And I don't know which is worse. Hearing that number and going, oh, it might have been, or finding out that it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
you know you get to that point where it's about, like I said, it's like, it's about mortality, but then at the same time, which is worse, thinking that you're seeing mortality catch up with everybody, around your age and older, or finding out that someone, it was awful, someone OD'd, and that might not be the case. Like, yes, they found drugs in his system, but
Mm-hmm.
they still haven't ruled it as an OD.
Mm-hmm.
um, because from what I understand, I've heard conflicting stories. One story said that they found him. One story said that they got they called emergency services because he was complaining of chest pain.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The second one is the one I've heard from more outlets, but I haven't seen the other one floating around a couple times. So
That's
I
the other
don't know which.
part that's frustrating is because you're dealing with the loss, the sudden loss. Like you like it comes out of left field because you're just minding your own business on the weekend. All of a sudden, you see like the news alert comes up or the Twitter or whatever it is, and it tells you that he died. And then it's just human nature. Just like how, like you, because you're trying to process it. So if there's some sort of logical thing or whatever, like if the bus got in an accident, their tour bus got in an accident or something, or like you said, he had a heart attack. You're like, okay, phew. Then you kind of know, and like, is everybody in the band okay? And then you know what I mean? It's just the nature of the thing. So you get half
Yeah.
this information that's devastating to you, and you can't emotionally grapple with it because you don't have all the information, right? You got like half a story. It's like if somebody wrote like a Wikipedia entry about a popular blockbuster movie or whatever, and they only wrote like the first 15 minutes, and then that's it. You don't know how it ends. You don't know who the killer is. Like, do they make it out okay? You don't know. And so
Yeah.
it's very frustrating. And these things go slower, right? Like by the time they do the toxicology reports and all the kind of other things that they have to do. Um,
Yeah.
and but so related to mortality though, there's one part that we kind of glossed over, which
Yeah.
is you asked the question like, do they keep going? And that's a question that Dave Grohl and the band have to sit down and decide. But what
Yeah.
about you? You as a fan, would you want them to keep going? I know it's not up to you, but if you had the choice, would you be like, yo, I know you know how much Taylor meant to the band and you know how much he was a face of the band. So do you want them to keep going? Or do you want them to shut it all down and then, I don't know, do side projects or something else after this?
You know, that's a good question. Where they're concerned, I can't say the words I'll be happy, because it's just the wrong word, but I'll use it, at least in this case. I will be, or better, I will be satisfied with whatever they choose to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Happy if they keep going. I will, I'll be satisfied. Satisfied is a better word. I'll be satisfied if they keep going. I'll be satisfied if they don't, because they if they feel like they can find their way back to it, then you know yes, I would love to see them in concert again. I would love that. But if they choose not to, I will be fine with either way. Linkin Park, as much as I would love to see them play, I absolutely don't want to. I in no way, shape, or form want them to keep going. I just
It's the
don't.
same thing with the Beastie Boys, right? Like you're done
Yeah.
now. Thank
I
you.
just, I mean, I, I will absolutely support them. And who knows, maybe they will find somebody who's got, Chester's energy or something. I mean, his son's a pretty good singer, actually. Who knows? Maybe he can do it. I don't know. It's just, but at the same time, like if they find somebody with that energy and they find somebody who can like reflect Chester's abilities and skills, um, uh, I mean, I would see them play, and I would be cautiously optimistic. And I would obviously support any new music that gets released because it's Linkin Park. And like I said, I'm like, they're my band. It's, Chester was my singer, but they are still my band.
hmm
Do I want them to? No. I don't want to go to a Linkin Park concert without Chester there. I just
Or a
don't.
hologram, even worse.
Oh, they would never do that. They were
hmm
very, very adamant about that. Mike was horrified when somebody suggested that to him. He's
hmm
like, oh God. He's like, I could never perform with a holographic Chester.
hmm
I'm like, I was like, I'm no, that's a hard pass on that one. But at the same time, I'm like, but again, I would be cautiously optimistic and supportive. Um, so because that's what you do, when it's someone that you love or something that you love, is like you support it anyway. But Foo Fighters, I mean, I feel like I would be satisfied. I can't, like I said, I can't say happy because I would never be happy to see them in concert or hear their music without Taylor ever again. But it doesn't mean that I can't be satisfied. I can't be supportive, and I can't actually really enjoy whatever comes from it. But I will be satisfied if whatever their decision is. Um, but I just, at the same time, there's like a small part of me, a very small part of me that, see, you know what? Right as I was about to say the words, I'm like, I want to take them back. I was going to say, I was like, you know what? A small part, a very tiny, tiny, tiny part of me doesn't want them to, mostly because I'm like, Dave's been through enough.
It's
But at the
done,
same
man.
time, yeah, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? That's telling him that that's telling him like, put your sticks down, put the mic down. It's like you've been through. It's like it's almost like saying like you don't get to decide this. You've been through enough, and we're going to tell you to sit down. No, 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 no. You read Storyteller and you learn right quick. I was like, he's not the person to just be like, okay, well, this is the easy road out, and I'm done.
hmm
You know, um, I don't think he's. I don't think he has it in him to do that.
And it's interesting too because he's in a different stage of life in the sense that like when Kurt died, he wasn't quote unquote rich. He was not fully established, that kind of thing. Now he's an accomplished filmmaker. Now he's obviously quite wealthy. He has like two or three. Was it 2 daughters or 3 daughters? Those can be really expensive though, so I'm sure the wealth won't last. But for the most part though, he's more or less set, and so he has options now. Whereas I think
Mm-hmm.
when to go back to the Storyteller, like I think those were his two choices: either like record these weird songs by himself in the studio, or go on tour with Tom Petty. It really was like a binary choice. It was either this or that. Like he had to do something, and I think now he has a lot more options. And I think as the grief kind of like fades, I think he'll have to do some like I guess soul searching for lack of a better term, and figure out where they go from here. The
Yeah.
band is back in LA, and I can't even imagine that flight home and like how difficult that was and how awkward that was.
Um, no, I don't even want to think about that. Those are the flight after is never something I like to think about, especially living 3,000 miles away from my family. But um I, that's just, I don't, it's like how do you stick yourself in a tube for however many hours it is when you're already, it's like, because grief is so, especially fresh grief is so suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
How can you put yourself in something that, even if you're not claustrophobic, you had to have felt claustrophobic,
Mm-hmm.
do that, you know?
So I'm leaning towards I think it's done. I think it's gonna be like MCA passing away with Beastie Boys. I think whatever happens after this, I think Dave will still find a way to make music. I think it'll be different music. I don't think He'll still find a way to make films. He'll still do Dave Grohl stuff.
Yeah.
But I think Foo Fighters in this current incarnation is done. It's a lot like I'd never been to New Orleans, and I always wanted to go to New Orleans. And New Orleans obviously had a reputation of like a lot of parties and a lot of jazz and Mardi Gras and all these kind of things, wild parades and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Hurricane Katrina hit, and then that devastated the city, and they're still recovering in many ways. And now, when you talk to people that have been to New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina and since, they tell you it's not the same. The energy's not quite the same. The vibe's not the same. The atmosphere is not the same. It lost something. I mean, obviously, like that Hurricane Katrina was a devastating experience. So there's multiple like trauma, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I can understand that, and it's the same thing where like, you know, it's almost like that window to go to New Orleans and to experience New Orleans and to experience the jazz and Bourbon Street and all those kind of things has closed. It's still there. You can go, but it's not going to be the same.
It's funny you say that. When I was a kid, hands down, and to all be all favorite musician all time with Michael Jackson. I will still say to this day that Thriller is still my favorite song.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's just, I mean, and at this point, there's just something nostalgic and iconic about it. But there's just something about Thriller that if you ever ask what's your favorite song, it's Thriller. Has been since it came out in 1983. And my parents, well, my dad in particular, did not like him.
Mm-hmm.
So there was never an opportunity for me to like as a person, my dad didn't like him. Um, there was never an opportunity for me to get to go see them and see him perform.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, despite all of the 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 stuff that's come out about him and the things that he's been accused of and any of that, I that's what I thought when he passed away, and still to this day I was like that is a window that closed.
Yeah.
He was the one in my childhood that I absolutely and like, again, regardless of him as a person and any trauma he inflicted on other people as an entertainer, I still am smarting that I never got to see him perform.
I didn't see the Foo Fighters perform. So even if they come back, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be like what I was saying about New Orleans. Even if they have a really cool, capable drummer, or even if Dave does the drumming and the singing or whatever it may be, it's literally not going to be the same. I was trying to get my act together, and we've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
that's whenever you lose anybody, whether it's Michael Jackson or Taylor Hawkins or Prince, the answer is always the same, which is always go. Even if you can't afford it, pay it by Visa and figure out how to pay it later. Like, steal the money, whatever it takes, because you do get a window of time. I know it feels like these bands have been forever, and like the Rolling Stones have been around since the 60s, and it feels like it's forever. But the truth is, you get a limited window of time of when these people are super popular, when they are on top of their creative like energies and things are rolling. Always, always go. That's the
Yeah.
message for the kids. Always, always go. Find a way. If you
You
can't
know,
go in your city, get in the car and go to another city. Maybe the tour is not sold out there. Whatever it may be, just find a way and get there and go to the shows. Always go.
yeah, I the last time that I would have seen Linkin Park perform, I had tickets. I had tickets. I think we've talked about this. I had tickets, and like it was for a Friday, and the weekend before, Chester and all of his dumbassery broke his foot.
Mm-hmm.
He'd done that on stage. Or broken something, I should say. I think, and ended up needing surgery that Monday. And that was obviously the Monday before the concert. So the concert was canceled and it was not rescheduled. We were refunded. And at the time, I was pretty broke. And I remember thinking I was super bummed that I was going to miss them. But there was a part of me that was like slightly relieved that I was going to get this money back. And it's weird because I can't change anything about what happened. It wouldn't have changed the outcome. But knowing now what I didn't know then, that was the last chance I would have ever had to see them perform,
Mm-hmm.
I regret ever having that thought go through my head, that I was relieved to get the money back.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I'm like, that was it. That would have been the last time. And I didn't even get to have it. So the last time I saw that, I have seen them perform one time since I moved to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And most I kept missing them. Like I'd be in California when they were in the East Coast and vice versa. And then one time, it's like it was 2014, 2015. I think it was 2014. Yeah, it was 2014. September of 2014 the last time I saw them perform. And I would have seen them, I think it was 2000, was it 15 or 16 when that concert would have taken place? I think it was 2016, like March of 2016 or something like that. And, it's like I said, it's hindsight, you know, it's like you said, it's like you just said, you hit the nail right on the head. You think it's going to last forever. And whether it's tragedy that strikes or whether it's just because this is when they're on their game, when they're, when they're at their peak, when they're at their best, it's like, go see the show. Go.
Always go.
Whether it's, they're just, by the time you make it, they're just not performing the way they used to, or tragedy happens. You don't know when you're going to get that opportunity again. Don't assume that you're going to.
That's the arrogance of pop culture, right? Like I've been seeing a lot of articles now about people like, are you going back to like concerts now that the pandemic is kind of over, not really over, sort of over? Are you going back to concerts during COVID and things like that? And the answer is always got to be yes, because you simply will not get these opportunities again, right? So I understand the risks. I understand the money. I understand all these issues that people have, and they're legitimate issues. People are broke, especially when you're in 20s and you're in university or something like that. I get it. But you got to go. You got to find a way, and you got to go. Because
I mean,
those windows are small, and they will close.
that was a sold out show at the Forum for Foo Fighters last year. And we were still, we're still in the pandemic. So we were still in the pandemic last August.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sold out show. And you know what? You do what you have to do.
Yeah.
I remember seeing all of these people, so many people. And just, you have a moment. You're like, fuck, there's a lot of people. There's a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta say, you know what? Fuck it.
Yeah.
This is my white whale, and I'm not missing it for anything.
Always go.
And I didn't, for this very reason.
Mm-hmm.
If I had said I don't want to go because it's going to be a sold out show at the Forum and there's a pandemic going on, I never would have gotten to see them perform.
Mm-hmm.
So go.
Yeah. That's our message for the kids. So we will wrap up this time. It was kind of a somber, reflective episode of My Summer Lair Space Station Oddity. We will be back next week.
Real quick. We can end this on a not somber note. What are your thoughts on Will Smith slapping Chris Rock?
Oh, I didn't really have like I don't know. I get like I still don't know if it was necessarily real. It seemed like it was real. Then it was fake. I don't know. Me, I thought initially I thought it was very much like the Janet Super Bowl booby, right? Where like, was this supposed to happen? Was this not supposed to happen? Was this an accident or was it a wardrobe malfunction? One of those things. And then that's kind of it.
Absolutely not supposed to happen.
Yeah, I don't think either one of those things. I don't think we were supposed to see her boobie, and I don't think he was supposed to get slapped. But
but at the end, no, that was definitely not staged in any way. You know what? I'll say this though. Yeah, I think Chris deserved it. You don't get on television in front of millions of people and make an unbelievably crass, ableist joke about somebody in the audience. You just don't do that. It's a whole different level of wrong. And I think Chris probably has a window where he probably doesn't have to apologize because he got bitch slapped on television. But he still better come out and apologize because that was beyond crass.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna be. It's one of those things now where like everything that happens in pop culture is a Rorschach test. So we're gonna get like a million different takes, a million different perspectives, and there's not gonna be very much consensus for the next little while. Moving on, it's a lot actually like the Janet Jackson Super Bowl booby, right? Where like everyone had these kind of different things. People were like throwing Justin under the bus. People were throwing Janet under the bus. People were conservative and didn't want any nudity at all on TV. Like there was just kind of like a mix mash of like opinions and experiences and whatever else people kind of have emotionally and spiritually. So I think for the next little while, it's just going to be a hot mess of like confusion as trying until a narrative eventually emerges.
Okay.
There we go.
Just want to end it on at least a little bit of brevity.
There we go. Yes. But thank you for hanging out with this episode of my Summer Lair Space Station Oddity. I've been Sammy.
I have been music lover, cradle to grave, Stephanie.
Oh, good reference, Dave Grohl reference. All right, thank you for hanging out. We covered quite a bit, but there's always room for more.
Have a good one. Peace out, everyone.